Hello, and welcome to a brand new day of free-to-play here on Magic the Gathering Arena. Get the dish on the latest with me, Lord Rumfish. So, March of the Machine, the Aftermath, has dropped into our laps unexpectedly on Arena here. That means it's time to update the Deckbuilding Toolbox series. Now, just as a quick refresher, in the Deckbuilding Toolbox series, I want to give you the keys to building as many different types of decks as possible. So this series is part crafting guide, but it's also, something to put your thinking cap on for. Because what we're looking at is the ideas, the seeds of different decks. So that being said, Aftermath is a really odd duck when it comes to the Deck Building Toolbox series. There are so many really weird niche cards in this set. Some of them look like they were only made for Commander. Some of them look like they were only made for one very specific, very narrow kind of deck. And quite a few of those are rares and mythics. I'm not going to tell you to craft those cards if you want to build that specific deck, or if you want to take one of those really oddball rares and try to build a deck around it that has, all creatures with activated abilities and it's all serpents and leviathans. That's fine. But I'm not going to recommend them. I'm going to focus in on the ones that I think have the widest application, so let's go. Training Grounds is a very powerful card. Now, I don't know what deck it fits into yet in Standard, but it's going to be in Standard for a long, long while. Standard's on a 3-year rotation now, if you weren't aware. I put out a video about the Standard rotation as well. And that means that Training Grounds is probably going to find a time to shine. Could be right away, could be later. But there could always be some activated abilities of creatures that turn out that if you, take 4 mana or 2 mana off of them, they suddenly are completely busted. So, it's a good tool to have in the toolbox. Coppercoat Vanguard, this is good for humans. It could also be good for soldiers if you have enough humans in your soldiers deck. So, this is a soldier. So there's some cross synergy that could exist for the soldiers deck. But obviously this is good for a humans deck, and I don't see why you wouldn't at least test it. It's just an uncommon. There's multiple different colors of humans decks you can try to build, so I don't think this one's too narrow, if you're interested. Iora's Oathsworn, I'm not going to recommend that you craft necessarily. I think it's probably good enough to play, or at least to try. 2/2 Menace, so immediate board impact is not great, not as good when you're behind, But if you manage to keep this alive, or if you're on the play, then if she connects just once, then she becomes a 3/3 Menace. And from there, you've got a very good rate on your hands. Very good card. The getting 4 counters and then getting a Demonic Tutor every time she connects, that's kind of just, icing on the cake. My big deal with this card is if you get her to attack once and connect and become a 3/3, then I think this is good. But rares are precious. And I'm not going to tell you to craft this card, because decks that want an aggressive 2-drop, usually you can find some kind of a replacement card at common or uncommon. So, yeah, I don't think this card is that special in that regard. Reckless Handling. So this is an uncommon. You can search for an artifact, reveal it, put it in your hand, shuffle, discard at random. And then if an artifact card is discarded this way, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. So there could be a combo deck that really wants to find this artifact, or there could be a deck where you plan on reanimating artifacts anyway. In which case, if this dumps into your graveyard, so much the better. If it doesn't, that's fine. You built the deck to put artifacts in the graveyard to reanimate. So there could be a home for this card. It's probably a bit narrow, but it's only an uncommon, so it's kind of a budget option if you want to try to build that deck. Feast of the Victorious Dead. This is a white, a black, uncommon enchantment. Beginning of your end step. If one or more creatures died this turn, so not on the opponent's turn, just on your turn, you gain that much life and distribute that many +1 counters among creatures you control. So, equal to the number of creatures that died. This could be pretty good. You know, you gotta set it up, you gotta have the right build for it, but there are a lot of tools in Standard for an Orzhov deck like this, or a 3-color deck like this. So I think this is actually and it would not be the worst for like a life gain deck, +1 counter deck. I don't think this is a bad tool to have in the toolbox. It's just an uncommon. Jirina, Dauntless General. White and a black, 2/2, rare. She's a human and a soldier. When she ETBs, exile graveyard. That's useful. Definitely is useful. Sacrificer. Humans you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. She's clearly meant for a humans deck, but again, she is a soldier. And if you had enough human soldiers that were in your soldier deck, then you might consider adding black. Otherwise, some kind of white-black 2 or 3 color humans deck probably would be made better with Jirina. She's kind of narrow and she's a rare. And that's one of the things I'm cautious of with this set. There's a whole pile of stuff that cares about legends and legendary things. I want to be very cautious about recommending crafting any of that, because your wild cards are all going to just get drained away, flow down the river, if you start trying to craft all the rares you need for a Legends deck. So, she could be good, but I'm not necessarily going to say you should craft her. Alright, Open the Way. Green, green, and X. This is a rare, it's a sorcery. Now this reads like it's a commander card, but bear with me. X can't be greater than the number of players in the game. There are 2 players in the game, you and your opponent. So, X can either be 1 or 2. Reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal X land cards. Put them onto the battlefield tapped, the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So, if X can be 2, then this is functionally a lot like Invasion of Zendikar, right? There's a 4-mana battle that's an uncommon. Can find 2 basic lands, put them on the battlefield tapped, then you got the battle hanging out that you can flip over into a 4/4. It's like a mana creature. So why would you want this instead of Invasion of Zendikar? Well, there are several reasons actually. So, the first reason, of course, is that you might want copies 5 through 8 of Invasion of Zendikar. If you want more than 4 cards that create a 4-mana effect that finds 2 lands, then you might want Open the Way. Open the Way can also be cast for 3. And if you're a serious ramp deck, then you definitely want to be ramping at 3 mana. You also want to be ramping at 4 mana. It's fine to play this for 3 if you have a dedicated ramp deck. It won't be ideal, but having the optionality to do it, if, you know, for whatever reason you've gotten mana screwed in your ramp deck, you must keep the mana flowing forward. You must keep accelerating, no matter what. So if you need to cast this for 3, or maybe you're in a, you know, some later stage of the game, you've got 6 mana, you've got a good 3 mana play that's going to help you stabilize the board, but you also would like to keep ramping, it would be fine to use your other 3 mana to cast Open the Way in that case. You can never cast Invasion of Zendikar for 3. So, the modality on this one is why you might include it in the same deck with Invasion of Zendikar. Plus, it gives you, more things at 4 mana that can do a double ramp. So yeah, I think Open the Way is a reasonable card in Standard, not just for, like Commander or a multiplayer format or something like that. This card's obviously better in those formats, but I think this card will play just fine in Standard. In fact, the modality to cast on either 3 or 4 could be exactly what I've been looking for in Ramp. It's a very nice option to have. So, don't snub this one. There aren't a lot of good land fetch cards for Ramp right now, and this could be for 3 or 4. Metropolis Reformer. This looks like an incredible roadblock against red aggressive decks. So if you're in best of 1, you have white in your deck, and you're looking to stabilize the board in the early game. You want some things that slow the game down on turn 3. Metropolis Reformer, 2/3 Flying Vigilance, gives you hexproof, so they can't point burn at your face. They also couldn't point, say, Invoke Despair at you, because they can't target you. They have to deal with the Angel instead. And whenever this is dealt damage, you gain that much life, and against red specifically, that's a big headache. Even if they point a burn spell at this and deal with it with a single burn spell, you still gain 3. Which is not what they wanted to be doing. It's almost like they didn't just lose a spell they could have pointed at your face, it's like they lost 2 of them. Because they pointed it at this creature, and then you gained 3. So they're down an entire lightning strike. This could be decent in Angels. This could be decent in Clerics. It's got life gain potential. Could maybe have some kind of a combo potential. Overall, I think this is a pretty square card. Not like the most exciting or anything, but it's a neat tool for the toolbox. Vesuvan Drifter. So we got a 2/4 Shapeshifter for 3 that flies. It's a good blocker, does not die to cut down. As far as being a stabilizing presence on the battlefield, it's not bad. You can look at the top card of your library anytime, and at the beginning of each combat you can reveal it, and if it's a creature card, this can become a copy until end of turn, except it has flying. It does say at the beginning of each combat, so that's your combat or on the opponent's combat. So you could not reveal this on your combat, and then on the opponent's combat you could reveal something, make a surprise blocker. Probably better as an attacker. But the turn you play it, it could be a surprise blocker. Something more than its stats suggest. You won't get the ETBs of whatever you reveal, it's just going to turn into it. But this one's neat. It's a neat tool for the toolbox. Filter Out, I think this one's actually really powerful looking, especially as an instant. Uncommon, blue, blue, and 1. Return all non-creature, non-land permanents to their owner's hands. There's a bunch of battles that kill things. Invasion of Fiora, Invasion of Innistrad, Invasion of Ravnica, that's colorless, Invasion of Olgrotha. And then, there's like some other ones of good value, right? Invasion of Amonkhet. They discard a card, you draw a card, you mill. Now imagine you could play all those spells and then return them all back to your hand at instant speed. One of them's even a board sweeper. Sounds pretty good to me. Also, you could be setting the opponent back at the same time. But what I really like for Filter Out is being proactive with it, coming up with your own game plan for how you want to return those permanents back to your hand. Anyway, it's a really neat tool for the toolbox. I think there's all kinds of deck building ideas that could pop out of this one. Blot Out, this is just solid removal. Uncommon, instant. Target opponent exiles a creature or planeswalker they control with the greatest mana value. So, you're always going to hit a high value target because it's the highest mana value one. One of the only ways on board that they could trip you up, right? They could make themselves untargetable or whatever, but on board, the thing you need to watch out for is if they have a high-value planeswalker and a high-value creature, and they are both at a high mana value that is the same mana value. Like, let's say they've got a 7-mana planeswalker over here and a Titan of Industry. In order not to lose the game, you need to kill the Titan of Industry. But since they have the same greatest mana value, the opponent gets to pick one, they choose the planeswalker, leave the Titan, you still lose the game. So that's the thing you need to watch out for with this one. But overall, as 3-mana removal spells go, this one looks very good. The question of whether you want to play a 3-mana removal spell is a whole nother thing. But it's just 1 black pip, it's easy to splash, it's only an uncommon. If you want a 3-mana removal spell, it even exiles. I think this one's very nice. Markov Baron. So this is a 2/2 for 3, it's uncommon, Vampire Noble. It has Convoke. It also has Madness, and I believe that you can Convoke for the Madness cost, because you are casting it for its Madness cost when you use Madness, and Convoke helps you cast it. It has Lifelink. It gives your other vampires +1/+1. One of the other neat things about Madness is it gives it Sneaky Flash. If you haven't played with Madness before, you might not know what it looks like to play with Madness, but you can cast it out of turn sequence. So you could discard it on the opponent's turn, cast it for its Madness cost, and it sort of flashes in. You could even flash it in by tapping your creature, so it could look like you're tapped out at the end of the opponent's turn, and you discard this and Convoke it in, and suddenly they they have to deal with it starting from the end of their turn. You know, like if they wanted to counterspell it or whatever. This card actually looks pretty neat, and it might give some new life to the Innistrad Vampire Tribe. We'll see. It's just an uncommon, if you want to try. Urborg Scavengers. So this one's a rare, but I think it might be worth the trouble. It's a 2/2 for 3. It's a rare spirit. Whenever this ETBs or attacks, you exile a card from a graveyard, target card. And this gets a +1/+1 counter. So I think if there's no target, it doesn't get the counter. Because then the ability gets countered because it had no legal targets. But most of the time you're going to play this, it will immediately be a 3/3. And this gains the keywords of a card exiled with it. It doesn't say a creature, it says it has flying as long as a card exiled with it has flying. So I'm guessing if you got a vehicle, or some other type of permanent which had a creature's keyword on it for some reason. Like, oh, here we go. Things like Hexproof and Indestructible actually show up on cards that are not creatures. That's sneaky. That's really sneaky. I like it. Okay. So yeah, it doesn't just care about the card being a creature card. Alright, so yeah, Hexproof, Indestructible, Yeah, those are probably the only ones that show up on like weird stuff like artifacts and enchantments and lands or whatever. But and then the other keywords could show up on vehicles or other places. The thing you really would love to do with this, of course, is to hit an opponent's Atraxa with it. Then this gains all of Atraxa's keywords. It could be even nastier if you, like, I don't know, discard your own creature with haste into your graveyard. Then this comes down, gains haste, attacks, exiles the opponent's Atraxa. Someone was talking about this earlier. And then be a 4/4 with all of Atraxa's abilities that was immediately attacking. Anyway, it's a graveyard hater that always gains a counter if it's eating things. So it starts out as a 3/3 and is like already threatening to grow into a 4/4 the first time it attacks. This looks pretty good. Really, it looks pretty good. I think this would be a solid tool for most black decks. Alright. Kolahan Warmonger. Got a 3/2 with haste for 3. It's already somewhat playable. Whenever it attacks, reveal... Sorry, not reveal, you look. Look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal a dragon card and put it into your hand. The rest go on the bottom in a random order. So, obviously this plays well into a Dragon's deck. Outside of a Dragon's deck, it's a pretty forgettable haste creature. You know, it's a budget option, it's just an uncommon. It's got 3 power. So, there are other things that would be vying with it at that point. But you could run it. And as long as you had a dragon somewhere in your deck, or 4 dragons, or, you know, some number of dragons that existed somewhere in your deck, then this could theoretically be better than some other random 3 power or 3-drop haste creature. Right? Building on a budget, as long as you have some dragons somewhere in the deck, this could draw you cards. And be a 3 power haste guy for 3. Seems really good to me. Seems like it doesn't just have to go in a dragon tribal deck. As I said, if you have like a dragon, 2 dragons, 5 dragons, whatever, then there's some chance you could hit it. And I think this is already borderline playable, so yeah, I think this looks pretty good. Nissa, Resurgent Animist. She is a mythic. 3/3 for 3. Legendary Elf Scout. Landfall. So she does like the Lotus Cobra thing. Gains you mana anytime land comes in. And the second time you get an elf or an elemental. So it seems like Nissa would go into a really narrow kind of deck, but that doesn't have to be the case. If you can get the landfall triggers to fix or accelerate your mana, then you're getting value off of Nissa. She can at least find other copies of herself from your deck. If you have any elves or elementals that you would like to play at all, for any reason. Doesn't have to be a lot of them. Could just be like 2 or 3. Then you could get extra value off of your Nissa. Now, if you're not getting a lot of extra value off of her, I don't know how hard you try to shoehorn her into a deck. But I think she's alright. I think she's a pretty reasonable tool for the toolbox here. Tranquil Frillback, I love this thing. This thing is great. So for 4 mana, alright, okay, on the floor, at the very floor, you can play a 3/3 for 3. It's an option. At 4 mana, you can have a 3/3, ETBs, destroys an artifact or enchantment. I already kind of like it better than Lauren of the Third Path. It's a much bigger battlefield presence than Lauren. And it has more modality than Lauren does. I think this is a great card for green just because of that very first ability there. You could also play it as a 3/3 for 4 that gains you 4 life. That's pretty solid against like a red deck. You get a pretty meaningful body on the field and slow them down quite a bit. So, you know, emergency blocker on turn 3, that's not the best, but you do it if you have to. Turn 4, you could gain 4 life, that would be great against them, or you could destroy their, you know, their mechanized warfare, or Kamano Faces Kakazan, something like that. You can also exile a graveyard if you need to. 5 mana is where this thing looks amazing. 5 mana, you can gain 4 and destroy an artifact or enchantment. I feel like that's the most common modes you're going to see. Obviously, if your opponent's trying to reanimate a Traxa or something, then you're going to exile their graveyard. And then, once in a while, you'll use the 6 mana version where you do all of it. You won't do that all the time. It's an option, right? Just like the 3 mana version of the card's an option, if you had to. The 6 mana version's an option, once in a while. And that's fine. But yeah, 4 and 5 mana, I think, are the real sweet spots on this card. And I've been looking for a card like this in green for quite a while. Where you just get a pretty reasonable rate of an ETB, destroy an artifact or enchantment. So this shaves it all the way down to 4 mana, and I like it. This is great utility. I wish it was an uncommon instead of a rare. But still, card's great. Samet. Samet is a legend and also a mythic, so just be cautious with your wild cards, but this one could be really good. So she's decently statted. She can come in with haste and draw you a card the turn she comes down. That's pretty good. And then if she lives, then your other creatures that, you know, enter tapped and attacking or, you know, have haste can also draw you cards. I think it's likely that Samet's going to see play. And Samet will be a pretty good tool in your toolbox if you're inclined to craft her. Alright, Cosmic Rebirth. This is an uncommon instant. If it was a sorcery, it'd be pretty so-so, but this one's an instant, which I like. Green, a white, and a colorless. Choose a permanent card in your graveyard. If it's mana value 3 or less, it goes right to the battlefield. That's cool. That can be a surprise blocker. That can do all kinds of stuff. If you don't put it on the battlefield, it goes to your hand, you gain 3 life. So this can flash in a creature. This could bring back, you know, a Saga or some other high-value target like that. Could bring back a Bankbuster. Could ramp you a land, right? If you like discard or mill a land to your graveyard, or you got like a fetch land that went to your graveyard, you could do that too, to ramp up a bit. The modality on this is pretty impressive. I really like this card. I think it's going to be good. Green-White's already like a fun ramp control archetype. I made a video about a deck that I love a little while back called World of Tomorrow. And I think you could definitely spin a take on that deck using Cosmic Rebirth with some of the early plays of that deck. Rocco, Street Chef. So Rocco's another card that reads like he's a commander card, but I think this is actually a lot better than it looks. So you get a 2/4 for 3. So doesn't die to a cut down. Pretty good blocking presence on the battlefield. Not bad. Beginning of your end step, each player exiles top card of their library. Until your next end step, each player may play the card they exiled this way. Now, this is kind of like a Howling Mine effect, where your opponent benefits more from it right at first than you do. A lot of people probably have kind of tuned out at that point, but the opponent really needs to kill Rocco. Because if they don't, then he gets to benefit from his secondary ability. Whenever a player plays a land from exile or casts a spell from exile, like the card you just gave them. And there's a lot of other cards that get played from exile in Standard now, too. You get a +1/+1 counter on target creature and create a food token. And this doesn't just happen once per turn, it could be multiple times a turn. But if they don't kill Rocco, and they use the card, then he turns into a 3/5 and you get a food token. On your turn, if you can use the card, he's a 4/6. And you got 2 food tokens now. And you could play into this exile theme even more than that. And then Rocco's just going to keep going. I think Rocco could be really powerful. Could be much better than people are giving it credit for. And I think it's a neat tool to have in the toolbox. Nashi, Moon's Legacy. So this is in Sultai colors, black, green, blue. This is a legendary rat shaman. It's a rare, it's a 3/4. So right away you're getting a 3/4 for 3 that has Menace and Ward 1. It's pretty annoying to get rid of. Anyone who's had to kill a Rafine, you know that a 4 toughness, 3-drop with Ward 1 is pretty hard to kill. And Rafine actually dies to a cut down right at first. This one doesn't. Whenever this attacks, exile up to 1 legendary or rat card from your graveyard and copy it. You may cast the copy. Now it doesn't say a creature card, so this could recast your planeswalkers, your legendary artifacts and enchantments and such. Probably creatures are the main thing you're going to do with it, but I'm just pointing that out. Can also get rats. That would be more of a budget option. Now that would be a narrow deck, but it would be a budget deck. So this card is a pretty good roadblock against an aggro deck. 3/4 for 3 is nothing to sneeze at. Ward 1 makes it hard to muck with. Has Menace, so it's actually difficult to deal with on blocks. Now you have to pay the mana to cast the copy that it makes, but getting free value out of your graveyard, it sounds like it's probably worth casting the card at that point. So, fair warning, legendary decks can be expensive to craft. I'm including this one here because this one seems very open-ended to me. In the course of building your collection, going through all of your, jump start and boosters and everything that you do on Arena in order to build the collection, the drafts you go through. They print a lot of legends nowadays, probably too many, maybe pushing Commander a little too hard. Your collection will probably have some number of legends. So this isn't just for a rat deck. And you might have budget options or things you already own in the collection, even though it doesn't read like a budget card. So this one could be pretty good. I think it's a neat tool. Obnixilis, Captive Kingpin. Black, red, and 2's a 4/3 mythic. Legendary demon, flying trample. Whenever one or more opponents each lose exactly 1 life, and damage does cause loss of life, put a +1/+1 counter on him. Exile the top card of your library. Until your next end step, you may play that card. People have found a combo with Obnixilis. There's the Mythic Red enchantment, All Will Be One, I think it is. Whenever a counter goes on a permanent, then it deals damage equal to that number of counters. So then as long as you have something to kickstart it, right, you need something to gain a counter. Once you've got Ob Nixilis in play, you've got one All Will Be One in play, then something gains a counter for some reason. Could be Ob Nixilis, because you deal damage to the opponent. Could be something else. Lots of things gain counters. Like, like Fable of the Mirror Breaker. Then, once you do it once, then the enchantment keeps triggering Ob Nixilis. For one every time, he keeps gaining another counter. And as long as they have less life than you have cards in your library... Well, no, actually, I guess it doesn't matter. As long as you're not going to draw a card, you won't mill out. So it doesn't matter if you mill yourself out. No, as long as they can't disrupt the combo, then you'll just win the game. It deals much damage as necessary. Maybe that's going to end up being too good. We'll see. You could also try Ob Nixilis with Oni Cold Anvil. It's another interesting angle. There's different ways to try to build this. Thermo Alchemist. You know, the ideas just kind of start popping up of how to make the opponent take one. So, could be interesting. Could be a neat tool in the toolbox. It certainly spawns a lot of deck ideas. Okay, Sigarda Font of Blessings. I bring up Sigarda here. She could go for a Humans deck. She could go for an Angel deck. So that's at least 2 decks that would be interested in Sigarda. The other thing that she does, which isn't quite as much of a draw as other permanents you control, have Hexproof. That's useful. And in the Legends deck, you know, if you could... what's his name? He makes like zombie copies of Legends that aren't legendary. If you could use him to get 2 Sigardas in play, then they'd make each other hexproof and everything would be hexproof. That's cute. Sigarda's a layer of defense, if you want a layer of defense, to where they have to deal with the Sigarda. If you already have Skrelv on the battlefield, then that means Skrelv can protect the Sigarda, and maybe they just can't target your stuff. If that idea appeals to you, Sigarda might be a card for your deck, even if you don't have that many Angels and Humans. Jolrael. So Jolrael, you know, she reads a little bit like she's a commander card or something, but let's hang on a second here. Also, I want to point out, Jolrael, if you buy 10 boosters in the store, you get the card style, you also get a copy of Jolrael for doing so. I don't know if this happens every time you buy 10 boosters. Someone please sound off in the comments and let me know. If you buy the 10 boosters again, if you get a second copy of Jolrael. It'd be nice to know. What you get is a 3/3 for 4, beginning of combat on your turn. A land becomes an XX green-blue bird with flying and haste. X is the number of cards in your hand, it's still a land. And separate from that, whenever a land creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So, Jolrael just on her own, you know, she could come down, put down some extra power and toughness, draw you a card, come in with haste. That doesn't sound too bad. Maybe treat her as a 5-drop instead of a 4-drop, because you want to get in with the bird. You don't want to leave all your lands tapped. If you have enough mana open to leave a protection spell for Jolrael, then that would be pretty nice. She's like a card draw engine. Be nice to keep her alive. And obviously you could make a creature land deck. Then if you do that, then Jolrael could start drawing you cards in a lot of different situations when your land creatures are smacking the opponent. They worded her to only work when they hit a player, which is a little disappointing. If they hit a planeswalker or they hit a battle, you're not going to draw a card. Still, I think Jolrael could contribute a decent amount to combat, even in a deck that's not very dedicated to Jolrael's thing. You know, just like player as a 5-drop, get in with a bird, draw a card, say go. They kill Jolrael, whatever, she replaced herself and did damage. I think she's alright. I don't know how good, but I think she's at least decent. Not a bad tool for the toolbox. Narset. So Narset is a mythic. 3/4, 1 blue, red, white. Legendary human monk. Creatures you control have prowess. She gives herself prowess. And whenever she attacks, you exile a non-creature, non-land card with mana value less than her power from a graveyard, including the opponent's, and copy it. You can cast the copy without paying its mana cost. Pretty cool. A bunch of 1 and 2 mana removal spells fall into this category. But you could also get, like, a Reckoner Bankbuster. Or an enchantment, or, you know, something to that effect. And then if you trigger her prowess, she could get something that's a 3 or a 4, and those are pretty tempting targets at that point. Plus, when you cast the thing that she gets, all of your creatures are going to get +1/+1 because it triggers prowess, and all of your creatures have prowess. So, I don't think this Narset actually slots into a traditional prowess deck necessarily. A traditional prowess deck wants to be kind of like keeping 1 mana open all the time to use a protection spell, trigger prowess, kill the opponent, that kind of thing. Narset's setting up for a little bit longer, just a little bit. So I think maybe you build the deck a little bit differently if you have Narset. And your other creatures don't have to have prowess. It would be beneficial, but she gives it to them. So you could run creatures that were just kind of good in and of themselves. Or tokens that were made by a red sorcery, or whatever. And they'll gain prowess, and then the next time you cast that sorcery with Narset, they'll get a +1 bonus. Neat card. Seems like there's deck building applications here. My main concern is it's a mythic, so, you know, judge for yourself if you want to craft Narset. Plarg and Nasari, I misread this card. I did. I thought this was complete junk that was, like, utterly unplayable. It turns out it's not quite that bad. So let's see. I want to read it with you and see if you've made the same misreading that I did. So, 2 red, 3 colorless. It's a rare, 5/4. Legendary Orc Ifrit. At the beginning of your upkeep, each player exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card. So you and the opponent, you both hit a non-land. So the opponent chooses one of those. Now I thought the opponent got to cast the one that they chose. When I was reading the card, I totally misread this thing. That's not what happens. They just choose one that you can't cast. But you may cast up to 2 in a 2-player game. It's going to be 1. So it's worded to where it's better in multiplayer, but you can cast the other one without paying its mana cost. So this is weird. It's weird in a 2-player game because you hit a non-land card, right? Some kind of a spell off of your deck and off of the opponent's deck. The opponent says, you can't cast that one. It's going to stay in exile. The other one, you can say, I can choose to cast this without paying its mana cost. Now, the opponent's always going to, try to make the right choice, like minimize the damage that you're doing to them with the free spell. Maybe set you up with something that doesn't affect the board that turn, or, like, this is the only creature, and leave you with, like, a removal spell so they both just stay exiled, whatever. The opponent's going to play games with you to try to keep you from getting value from this, but a lot of the time, you're going to get the second best card, and you're going to get it for free. And that's interesting to me. Now you have to get down this 5/4 for 5 and get all the way back to your upkeep, which is a really big task in Standard. It's not that it doesn't affect the board, it does, right? It's a 5/4 body, so it's not a do-nothing enchantment. But if you play this and it just dies to a removal spell, then the opponent's like 1-for-1 traded with you, and that doesn't feel very good. However, we've seen firsthand that cards are not always bad just because they can get 1-for-1 removed. If this card lives, it will start generating free spells for you. It's always the second best spell between yours and the opponent's deck. It's really weird, but it's not as bad as I thought it was. And I'm kind of interested. Now that I realize how it works, and I realize, the opponent doesn't get the other spell, they just stop you from getting one of them, I'm a little bit curious to try it. I'm not going to tell you to craft this one, it's probably bad. But I just wanted to give everyone a careful reading of it so we know how it works. Alright, Campus Renovation. Red, white, 3 colorless, uncommon, sorcery. Return up to 1 target artifact or enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So, regrows an artifact or enchantment straight to the battlefield. Resurrect, I should say. Exile the top 2 cards of your library until your next turn, you may play those cards. So you get a Rin's Resolve stapled onto Repair and Recharge, sort of. So this can get you back, Portal to Phyrexia, or One with the Multiverse, whatever it's called, or a number of other giant artifacts and enchantments, and has more value stapled onto it. Could end up being really good. It's just an uncommon. I think it's probably worth experimenting with. Alright, Nahiri's Resolve. This could be super powerful. It's white, red, 3 colorless, rare enchantment. Creatures you control get +1/+0 and have haste. That's not even the super exciting part of the card, but it does play well with itself. So at the beginning of your end step, you exile any number of non-token artifacts and or creatures you control. So you can't do like enchantments and battles and planeswalkers, you can't reset everything. But you do get to reset artifacts and creatures. They return under their owner's control at the beginning of your next upkeep. So they're not hanging around to block for you. Right, this is a very aggressive flicker line. But if this enchantment is still around on your upkeep, they come back with +1/+0 and haste, in addition to all the other stuff they do when they enter the battlefield. This card looks really, really quite dangerous. Kind of in the same way that Yorion did. It's more aggressive and less defensive. Scary, though. I think this could be really good. I think it's an interesting tool to have in the toolbox. Alright, Niv Mizzet Supreme. The reason I'm bringing Niv Mizzet up here is he could be like a control deck finisher. So he costs white, blue, black, red, green. He's a rare 5/5 legendary dragon avatar. Flying, hexproof from monocolored. And the hexproof from monocolored means that most things the opponent's doing can't target him. Most of the commonly played removal doesn't target him. There are some things that target him, obviously. But the really commonplace ones that people pepper their decks with 4 ofs don't hit Niv Mizzet. So could be very dangerous as a finisher in that regard. He also says, each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard that's exactly 2 colors has Jumpstart. Now, there aren't that many instants and sorceries in our format that are exactly 2 colors. Some of them already have Flashback. And Flashback is better than Jumpstart because you don't have to discard. The Jumpstart cost might be cheaper mana-wise, though. Sometimes you pay more mana when you flash something back, and the Jumpstart could be like, pay its original mana cost and discard a card, so there could be corner cases where that's valuable to you. But Niv Mizzet's going to be around Standard for a long time. And it seems like they're setting up things for maybe a 2-color theme somewhere later in Standard. It's going to be around for 3 years. So I think it could already be kind of niche playable. You know, 5-color control, funky deck. You could have some instants and sorceries already that you could get value from with Niv Mizzet. And into the future, I expect we'll keep seeing more 2-color instants and sorceries that show up. So I don't think Niv Mizzet is a terrible craft. If you want to make a 5-color deck, Niv Mizzet as a 1-of I think is a pretty reasonable inclusion. Rebuild the City. I think this card's really cool. So it's Riveteer's colors. Black, red, green, 3 colorless. Some people might call it Jund. Sorcery, rare, choose target land. Create 3 tokens that are copies of it. That's neat. Except they're 3/3 creatures that have Vigilance and Menace. So you can't use them for mana right away. But this ramps you 3 mana and puts 9 power and toughness on the board that has Vigilance and Menace. And this wouldn't look as good if they didn't have Vigilance and Menace. But this means that, you know, if your opponent has some annoying blocker across the way like Sholdred, well, they actually need another blocker. Otherwise, you're going to get through for Menace. And you're still going to have them untapped with Vigilance for defense. So the opponent actually needs 2 blockers. And that means I think that they stack up better than they look against a lot of creatures in the format. Just, overall, I think this card generates enough value that I'm in. I like this. I like it for ramp, like, and I mean go really big ramp. I mean you want to be casting, like, Portal to Phyrexia, making your, like, 8, 9, 10 drops and stuff. This'll take you from 6 to 9 mana even if you don't top deck a land. So you could go from 6 to 10. And yeah, frankly I think the value proposition on this card and the threat created by this card is a big deal. Plus the land that you copy could be something unusual. Like, let's see, if you copy, what is it, Blast Zone, then you could get a bunch of sweepers. that are also 3/3s with Vigilance and Menace. You can gain counters at different rates at different levels and threaten to blow up different things on the board, and you have the mana to do it because you have 3 more lands. You could copy, one of the lands that blows up a non-basic. You both fetch a basic out of your library. If you think your opponent doesn't have basic lands in their deck, and you're in a stage in the game where you're trying to break parity, rebuild the city, blow up like 3 or 4 of their lands. They probably won't come back from that. There are some neat lands to copy, right? Or Mirrex. You could make 3 copies of Mirrex, and now you have 3 more mana, so you might maybe be able to activate lots of copies of Mirrex because you've ramped your mana so much. There's interesting stuff that happens with this card. I think it's playable at a baseline rate on its own, but once you start thinking about the lands you can copy, the things go nuts. I think this card is really cool. I think it's well worth creating for the toolbox. Alright, Death Rattle Oni. This is just an uncommon. 5/4 with flash. Costs 7, but it costs 2 less to cast for each creature that died this turn. And probably you want to set up some way to make that happen. So maybe you want a sacrifice outlet. Especially like a free sacrifice outlet would be really good. And when this ETBs, you destroy all other creatures that were dealt damage this turn. So, obviously if you make a weird bad attack with some little creatures, your opponent just blocks everything. Death Rattle only blows up a bunch of their board. That'd be cool. If the opponent thinks you might have Death Rattle Oni, they have to be careful about attacking in when you have chump blockers. Or the Death Rattle Oni could come down and blow them out for attacking into your board. The card seems neat. It seems useful. You're not going to be playing it for 7 mana, so as long as you're enabling the card, you need to be thinking about it more in the range of like a 1 to 5 mana card. And on top of all of that, it is a 5/4 with flash. Normally you would want to do this post-combat, but once in a while, you're going to flash this in mid-combat to eat a creature that's attacking, surprise blocker. Flash it in at the end of your opponent's turn, just to get a 5-power attacker on your turn. It has all the benefits that come with being a flash creature. This one seems neat, and it's just an uncommon. So I think it's a good tool for the toolbox. And Draenith Ruins. So I think 1, maybe 2 copies of Draenith Ruins would be an interesting craft. Now, again, you need to decide how you're going to acquire Aftermath, if you're going to buy boosters, or there's the weird new limited format where 1 card in the pack of March of the Machine's been replaced with an Aftermath card. It has its special own premier draft category. If you're going to play that draft, or if you're going to buy boosters, go ahead and do that and see what you open first before you make your crafts. If you don't get any of this one, I think 1 or 2 copies is really useful to have in the toolbox. Just, anytime you can include something in your mana base that gives you a mana sink, gives you value into the late game, it's better than just, a dead card. Another basic land you didn't need. As long as you're not crippling the mana base to include a colorless land. And that's why I'm saying 1 or 2 copies instead of like 4 copies. Then this card could be really good. It could also, I think it could be especially good for a ramp deck that has a lot of mana to throw around in the first place. And ramp decks probably don't have that many humans most of the time. Humans don't get that big So a lot of the creatures you're ramping into probably are not human. This card looks pretty good to me. So, yeah, these are the cards that I think are the best picks. There's a bunch of other really weird ones in the set, but they seem like very narrow cards. These cards here feel like some of the best toolbox options. And to prove it, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is here and redeem these wild cards. So there you go. I hope that you and I both have fun playing with the new cards. Felt like I was just doing this a couple weeks ago for March of the Machine, but here we are. And if you have enjoyed my content today, please like this video, please subscribe to my channel, it would help me out tremendously. And until next time, stay cool.